unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty brought to you in partnership with MyPillow.com. Hearings are in full swing in Washington as Trump's picks for his leadership team are put to the test. Pete Hegseth, for example, the president's nominee for Secretary of Defense, fought a fierce battle this week. Hegseth, of course, came under massive enemy fire, with one ex-user describing the Democratic barrage as, quote, literally worse than active combat, and memeing the horrors Hegseth faced like this.
Yes, our veterans organizations that will help our veterans get every damn thing that they deserve because they signed on the dotted line.
Despite the onslaught, Hegseth dodged Democratic bullets and emerged unscathed. In fact, he appears poised to take Capitol Hill and the Pentagon once the final Senate confirmation vote is called. Here to discuss all of this with us today is Souls and Liberty contributor Arthur Clareau. I'm your host, Stephen Wynn, coming to you from Kansas City. Arthur, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Stephen.
You bet. All right, so let's just get right to it. Hegseth took quite the grilling, didn't he?
Yeah, you could say that again. I would not have wanted to be in his shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. I don't know. It was a great example, I think, of courage and poise under fire for sure. And we will get into the specific Democratic questioning, the attacks later on in the show. But first, I'd like to just basically review some instances, some excerpts from his opening statements, from other statements that really outline what an excellent choice he is. So first up, we'll look at a short excerpt from his opening remarks in which he praises his wife and gives glory to God, specifically to Jesus Christ. Let's take a look.
Thank you to my incredible wife, Jennifer, who has changed my life and been with me throughout this entire process. I love you, sweetheart, and I thank God for you. And as Jenny and I pray together every morning, all glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. His grace and mercy abounds each day. May his will be done.
All right, good for him for that. That's very encouraging to hear. Also, very interesting. At the outset of the hearing, he listed key objectives that he plans to pursue for the Pentagon if confirmed as Secretary of Defense. Well, let's take a watch.
If confirmed, I'm going to work with President Trump and this committee to, one, restore the warrior ethos to the Pentagon and throughout our fighting force. In doing so, we will reestablish trust in our military. Number two, we're going to rebuild our military, always matching threats to capabilities. This includes reviving our defense industrial base, reforming the acquisitions process. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, no more valley of death for new defense companies, modernizing our nuclear triad, ensuring the Pentagon can pass an audit, and rapidly fielding emerging technologies. And number three, we're going to reestablish deterrence. First and foremost, we will defend our homeland, our borders, and our skies. Second, we will work with our partners and allies to deter aggression in the Indo-Pacific from the Communist Chinese. And finally, we will responsibly end wars to ensure that we prioritize our resources to reorient to larger threats. We can no longer count on reputational deterrence. We need real deterrence.
All right, that sounds very good to me. Restoring the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, reestablishing deterrence. This is exactly what's needed to reform the U.S. military system. What do you think, Arthur?
Well, I couldn't agree more. It's something that's so foundational to the military in general, the concept of a military, and not to mention the U.S. military, which has for decades now, and for all of its history, been an exemplary war-fighting machine. So I couldn't agree more. I mean, is there a single American that loves the country who doesn't want that?
Right, exactly. And I think now, especially after years of degradation under Biden Harris and well before under Obama Biden, the reforms have never been more needed, really, especially in light of the fact that we are increasingly moving toward a multipolar world. It's not just U.S. hegemony that is in place. We've got a rising China, a rising Russia, just the constant threat of increased regional conflicts in the Middle East and the rest of the Muslim world. So I think this is coming at just the right time. I really, really hope that Hegseth is voted in, because he's going to really undertake, I think, a much needed revolution. Now, he outlined, from the general points that he made, he outlined some specifics that I think are very, very interesting. I'd like you to comment on. First of all, here in the U.S. as well as in Canada, the vast majority of Americans were there was a great deal forced upon them during the lockdowns in the wake of COVID. Especially unconscionable was the treatment of our troops, thousands of whom were dismissed, just booted out of the military like dogs because they refused to violate their consciences and get the jab. And Hegseth pledged during the hearing to rectify this. Let's listen.
We haven't even talked about COVID and the tens of thousands of service members who were kicked out because of an experimental vaccine. In President Trump's Defense Department, they will be apologized to. They will be reinstituted with pay and rank.
All right. I'm very glad to hear that. Another key component of what he plans to do is really reverse and purge the politicization of the military, which has just been constant over the past 4 years and before, frankly. He's got a lot of ideas regarding that. Let's listen.
The Department of Defense under Donald Trump will achieve peace through strength. And in pursuing these America First national security goals, will remain patriotically apolitical and stridently constitutional. Unlike the current administration, politics should play no part in military matters. We are not Republicans. We are not Democrats. We are American warriors. Our standards will be high, and they will be equal, not equitable. That's a very different word. We need to make sure every warrior is fully qualified on their assigned weapons system, every pilot's fully qualified and current on the aircraft they are flying, and every general or flag officer is selected for leadership or promotion purely based on performance, readiness, and merit. Leaders at all levels will be held accountable, and warfighting and lethality and the readiness of the troops and their families will be our only focus.
And of course, a key component of that is killing DEI, critical race theory, all the various flavors of ideology responsible for the wokeification of the military. Hegseth is definitely targeting that, as he said.
You have to tear out DEI and CRT initiatives, root and branch out of institutions.
100%.
And then you have to put in Army, Navy, and Air Force secretaries and others, civilian positions at the helm, who are committed to the same priorities that the President of the United States is, and if confirmed, the Secretary of Defense will be. Send a clear message that this is not a time for equity. Equity is a very different word than equality. Equality is the bedrock of our military. Men and women, duty positions in uniform, black, white, doesn't matter. We treat you equally based on who you are in the image of God as an individual. And we all get the same bad haircuts. You're not an individual, you're part of a group. Equity prescribes some sort of an outcome based on differing attributes that we have that divide us. What skin color are you? What gender are you? And then infuse that into institutions which manifest in things like quotas, formal or informal, which does what to morale? Sends it in the tubes. And it makes people feel like they're being judged by something other than how good they are at their job.
Arthur, that's a very interesting point. He wants to focus on equality of opportunity, not equity of outcome. And of course, that tied to that is getting rid of DEI, CRT, all that garbage, that woke nonsense garbage. Speak to that, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. Some of the things you brought up prior really do impact this as well. I mean, all of this is one big mess that needs to be untangled, and I think he's really well pointed out which threads need to be pulled and cut. For example, the politicization of the military, what happened during COVID, that was a big deal. I mean, it happened here in Canada as well. It happened all over the world, but that was there's a strong similarity in that moment to what was experienced in offices of government and military and other apparatuses of power throughout the communist world when communists took over, right? It was this idea of you pledge loyalty to the party despite the evidence of your eyes and ears, and if you don't, you're gone, at the very least. And it really had that same flavor to it, where it was like, hey, listen, you take this experimental jab, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it, works or not, whether you need it or not, and whether it actually has any foundation for being mandated or not, or else you're gone. And that's the first, those are the kinds of steps that have been taken definitely over the last 4 years, but over the last few decades as well, right? Trying to weed out those whose loyalty is not to party, or those who will not just immediately salute whatever new party line comes along. And that's not the purpose of the military, obviously, right? Like I said earlier, the purpose, and like Hegseth said many times during that tribunal, it seemed, the purpose of the military is to be effective at what it does. It's to be effective in war fighting and to be an effective deterrent to keep peace around the world. And whether we like that it is the world policeman at this point or not, that's kind of irrelevant to this point. The point is it needs to be effective at what it does. And right now, like you said, there's so many things at play. The world is multipolar. It's no longer a unipolar world. Francis Fukuyama and the end of history was just totally wrong. There is no kumbaya liberal world order out there. And the world is dog eat dog, and power is what matters. So if you don't want to be at the mercy of other powerful forces, you need to be at least equally, if not more powerful, and then you are able to be virtuous. And that's a really important thing to remember. So to do so, you need the apparatus of power, which is your military. Not only that, but it's multipolar. The world is multipolar, but also the entire military landscape has changed. What we know of, even from the war on terror, the Afghanistan and Iraq wars, and the last 20 years of military, the way that battles are fought, the way wars are fought, has completely changed in many ways. One way, the dangers faced now are peer level powers. What that means is that these are countries with similar abilities. This isn't just terrorists hiding in caves. This is significant military power. Secondly, it's a different generation of warfare as well. This is no longer simply armies on a battlefield or military units engaging each other. You have the cyber aspect, you have the infrastructure aspect, you have secretive hidden wars, you have information wars going on. Then you also have robotics, AI, drone technology, all these sorts of things they're new. This is a little bit like World War I in that sense, where you had old ways of doing things and brand new technologies meeting at a very dangerous time. So you need people in place who are A, aware of that, B, able to deal with that, and C, aren't tripped up in these ridiculous ideas of, hey, your skin is not brown enough, or you're not female enough to be doing this. I'm sorry, man. I know you're an expert in cyber warfare. We don't want you. We want someone who has these tendencies or these characteristics or traits. So with this whole thing, again, it's one big knot, and the military has been very much tied up in it, and it needs to be untangled.
Yeah. I love your analogy, looking back to World War I, because that really is kind of where we're at. We've been talking for years about preparing for, the global threats of the 21st century. Well, they're here, and as well as a whole new range of technologies, as you outlined. And I think America has to be ready. It has to be laser focused on its mission. America's military has to be laser focused on its mission of defending the country. And if we allow ourselves to continue to be sidetracked by just woke nonsense, DEI, questions of race and sexuality, all this kind of thing, it's going to be catastrophic for the country. All we have to do is look to Los Angeles to see the effects of that kind of philosophy. And that's one city. Every American city, every inch of our ground is under a much greater threat if we allow this to continue. So, yeah, I think you're spot on with that point. And I just shudder to think where we would be going if Harris had gotten into power. Thank you, God, that Trump won on November 5th. And please let Hegseth make it past the finish line shortly. All right. When we come back, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at some examples of the absurd attacks that were lobbed against Hegseth this week by rabid, insane, woke Democrats. Stay tuned.
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support, and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented MyPillow. MyPillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all three.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night, and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King MyPillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic MyPillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Arthur, so we've looked at some of the things Hegseth wants to do inside the DoD under Trump. And now let's look at the response of the Democratic opposition, Team Biden, Team Harris, who are absolutely wedded to the ongoing politicization of the Pentagon, regardless of how much that degrades the U.S. military. They're fundamentally wedded to that disastrous leftist ideology. Hegseth faced really an army of accusers this week, and not surprisingly, they didn't fight fair. They didn't focus on matters like his professional capabilities. Instead, they launched one personal attack after another. Now, Hegseth, of course, recognized that this would be coming. He knew this would be their line of attack. Accusations of by anonymous sources of sexual improprieties, accusations of drunkenness at work. But thankfully, he preempted this approach by confronting it head on during his hearing. We've got a clip of that. Let's take a listen.
We undertook this responsibility with an obligation to the troops to do right by them for our warfighters. And what became very evident to us from the beginning, there was a coordinated smear campaign orchestrated in the media against us. That was clear from moment one. And what we knew is that it wasn't about me. Most of it was about President Donald Trump, who's had to endure the very same thing for much longer amounts of time. And he endured it in incredibly strong ways. So we, in some ways, knew it was coming. We didn't understand the depth of the dishonesty that would come with it. So from story after story in the media, left-wing media, we saw anonymous source after anonymous source based on second or third-hand accounts. And time again, stories would come out, and people would reach out to me and say, I've spoken to this reporter about who you really are, and I was willing to go on the record. But they didn't print my quote. They didn't print any of my quotes. Or I've worked with you for 10 years, or I was your accountant, or I was your chief operating officer, or I was your board member, or I was with you on 100 different tour stops for Concerned Veterans for America. No one called me. No one asked about your conduct on the record or off the record. Instead, a small handful of anonymous sources were allowed to drive a smear campaign, an agenda about me, because our left-wing media in America today, sadly, doesn't care about the truth. All they were out to do, Mr. Chairman, was to destroy me. And why do they want to destroy me? Because I'm a change agent and a threat to them, because Donald Trump was willing to choose me, to empower me, to bring the Defense Department back to what it really should be, which is warfighting. So I'm willing to endure these attacks. But what I will do is stand up for the truth and for my reputation. False attacks, anonymous attacks, repeated ad nauseum, printed as nauseum, as facts. We have provided to the committee, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're going to share, on-the-record statement after on-the-record statement from people who have served with me, worked with me at Fox News, Concerned Vets, Vets for Freedom, you name it, from the top of the chain to the bottom, who will say, I treat them with respect, with kindness, with dignity. That's men, that's women, that's black, that's white, that's every background. I have prided myself as a leader of respecting people, being professional. That is the balance of mine. I'm not a perfect person, as has been acknowledged. Saved by the grace of God, by Jesus and Jenny. I'm not a perfect person, but redemption is real. And God forged me in ways that I know I'm prepared for. And I'm honored by the people standing and sitting behind me, and look forward to leading this Pentagon on behalf of the warfighter.
Yes, good for him. I was very glad to see that he was ready to defend himself, because it was a circus, an absolute circus, and it just showed really. It showed what he is made of, and it showed what the Democrats are made of. One ex-user, I love this, one ex-user summed the circus up this way. We've got a post from this person. Let's take a look at this. Drunk accuses him of alcoholism. Cheater accuses him of cheating. Stolen valor accuses him of lying. The Democrats are a joke. And yes, they are 100%. Absolutely. Now, some of the jokes wrote themselves, such as when Senator Elizabeth Warren, she tripped over herself, seemingly misidentifying Hegseth as a general. Let's look.
In other words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. But you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
That was great. I loved that look on her face, the frozen look, the look in her eyes. She knew that she made a out of herself with that statement. But it just shows she and her Democratic colleagues were just so just so intensely focused on trying to get a gotcha moment, score a gotcha moment against Hegseth, something that they could parade on social media, take back to their leftist constituents and whatnot. It's good to see that apparently pride does indeed go before the fall, don't you think?
Absolutely. I didn't listen to the entire 4 hours. I listened to a summation of it. But from what I listened to, there was one good question posed by Democrats. Only one. The rest of them were just some version of their own beliefs being projected on other people, or their own insecurities. The most frustrating to me is the attempt to get people like Hegseth to buy, or conservatives in general, to buy into their frameworks. Whatever it might be, their identity politics frameworks, they'll then use those as if that was the standard that we all agreed upon for morality, and then accuse you of breaking that standard. And it's like this multi-step series of nonsensical points being made. And you're like, and then they think that's a gotcha. And I guess with their social media crowd, it is, right? On their accounts and on their X and whatever it is, they're going to get some, high fives or whatever it is from their voters. But it really is not helpful in bringing the country together, or just understanding if this is the right candidate for the job, right? That's what these hearings are at least supposed to be about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and I think the name of the game during the Hegseth hearing was hypocrisy. It was a number of Democratic performances were so laughable that conservatives couldn't help but point out the absurdity and hypocrisy of the Democrats' approach. One example I'd like to review: Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, who accused Hegseth of drunkenness. She said this:
I have read multiple reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports peddled by NBC
Do you
News
know
that run
that
directly
drinking on the job
contradictory
is
to the dozens of men and women at
not
Fox News
contemplated
Channel
on-
who I work with,
I'm
who
not
came
hearing
on
the
the
answer to my
record
question.
and said they've
In your
never
opening
seen
statement,
that.
Mr.
All right, there's a lot to be said about that clip. We'll get to that in just a moment, but I just want to pose the question. Suddenly Democrats are sticklers for sobriety. That's very, very interesting. It's strange, rather, because considering Kamala Harris's disheveled appearance, her bizarre behavior that was very much on display during her post-election empowerment message to her voters. This was released just a few weeks ago. Let's remind our viewers of her performance.
I just have to remind you, don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did. And you have the same ability to engage and inspire. So don't ever let anybody or any circumstance take your power from you.
Again, thank God that woman is not heading to the White House. Of course, Exhibit A in the army of drunken Democrats, I would say, is Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. The examples of her tripping over her own intoxicated tongue are too numerous to recount. But we do have a fine example here from 2019. Get some popcorn. Let's watch this.
I love coming here in this week that we observe the birth of our presidents, in particular George, our founding father, and our founding mother, George Washington and Martha Washington. We followed his lead on protecting the butterfly sanctuary, and the knowledge that he has of the region, being a border member of Congress. And what that meant was we would have hundreds of millions of dollars. And we had the opportunity to meet with David Higgerson, the field director of field for the CPD detection. That Constitution begins with the beautiful preamble to the Constitution, and the very first words at the end of following the preamble are Article 1, the legislative branch. But that's what will happen on Monday. Mr. Castro's resolution will go to the Rules Committee. Again, I thank my friend here, my colleague, Mr. Cuellar, and now it's more there's so much more immigration needs here. That helps the Border Patrol because this isn't what their job was.
And again, that's one of literally dozens of examples of Pelosi flubbing online. It's just remarkable to see her performance. And again, the Democrats are concerned about sobriety. Of course, we would be remiss if we didn't circle back to Senator Hirono's own slurring accusation, akin to almost what seems to be the officer problem. She slurred practically her entire line of questioning, and conservatives, of course, because we have a sense of humor, we went online. We had particular fun with her. One guy took to X and posted this. He listed the aid of AI, and he made this very, very funny meme. Check it out.
Or regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports peddled by NBC.
Other accusations, though, that were lobbed against Hegseth were no laughing matter and no less hypocritical on the part of Dems. Senator Tim Kane of Virginia, for example, he tried to drag Hegseth through the mud, accusing him of adultery. He said this.
Completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? How is that a complete clear? Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old. And she was, and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you? Those were false charges. Well, no, fully investigated, and I was completely cleared.
This is the same Tim Kaine, mind you, that voted against impeaching Bill Clinton for adultery prior to running as Hillary's running mate in 2016. It's also the same Tim Kaine who just months ago stood proudly alongside Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, proudly endorsing the Harris campaign.
We are in Annandale, Virginia, where the Biden-Harris campaign just opened the first coordinated campaign office in Virginia.
And we are going to, one, win this election. Senator Kane is going to go back to the Senate, and we're all going to do this thing together.
Since taking office, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have stood up for our Commonwealth at every turn, building a stronger economy for everyone, creating millions of new jobs, defending women's reproductive freedoms, and so much more. Virginia, we've got to have the backs of Joe and Kamala and win this November.
Thanks, everyone.
Emhoff, of course, you may recall, while married to his first wife prior to Kamala, he had an affair, impregnated his nanny, and according to some reports, strong-armed her into getting an abortion. So this, Kane clearly cares a lot about sexual morality. This absurd, empty moralizing by Democrats attacking Hegseth was so blatant, so disgusting that one Republican colleague couldn't help but challenge their response. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma, he called them to account. He excoriated them for their staggering hypocrisy. I wanted to give this guy a hug. Let's take a look at how he dished out some truth to his Democratic colleagues.
Senator Kane, or I guess I better use the senator from Virginia, starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No, but it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because the man's made a mistake. And you want to sit there and say that he's not qualified? Give me a joke. I mean, it is so ridiculous that you guys hold yourself as this higher standard and you forget you got a big plank in your eye.
Yeah, well said. The Democrats, they should be blind with the size of the planks they have in their eyes, as though Democratic or politicians of any stripe have any room to be dishing out accusations of immorality against others. It's just absurd, absolutely absurd. Arthur, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, this is one of those things. I mean, you have to ask, why do you think people have one of the lowest views of politicians ever? Like, if you list all the professions, politicians are always near the bottom, if not the bottom entirely. I mean, there's drunks on the street and homeless people who have better, public impression than many politicians, and it's because it's just this obvious hypocrisy all the time. And it's not just one party. All parties do this. This is a problem of party politics. You're trying to toe the line and be with this gang versus that gang kind of thing. Which then, of course, just means that whoever you voted for to be your representative is now some kind of, NPC put in place to protect a party line. As you very well pointed out there with Senator Kane, right? The guy votes against impeaching his president for adultery, and then is, of course, hounding Hegseth for adultery. Now, this I think also points to how, for people who do have good character and who are trying to get involved and are trying to make change in the world, it's really important to watch your actions, right? We have an entire book called the Bible with lots of stories about the temptations and the fallen nature of man. And I mean, let's be real, we've all sinned, we've all come short of the glory of God. But if you're trying to make change, obviously actions speak louder than words, and it's true. Like this doesn't look good for Hegseth in this regard. Like these are mistakes that he made in his life for sure. I have nothing to say about them. It's not my place to talk about. It's his place to talk about or to figure out. But again, the people accusing him. Let's go to the story of the woman who was accused of adultery with Jesus. Like he who's without sin, go ahead and cast that first stone, please. But again, it also goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. There's so many of these questions were just nonsense, has nothing to do with the point of this hearing. One of them, there's a Democrat who was trying to elicit from Hegseth a commitment on basically policy of who should or who should not be able to run for or be placed as Secretary of Defense, based on these kind of private life instances. And yeah, sure, he brought up horrible things. It's like, hey, if you killed someone, should you be able to? If you beat a woman on the street, should you be able to this, that, or the other? And it's like, look, this is a ridiculous line of questioning. What are you're giving me hypotheticals and asking me if I should shape policy around this hypothetical that you're making up when we're talking about my fitness for this particular position? What are we doing here? And of course, I think Hegseth managed it quite well. And I think that this is something that conservatives are going to need to keep doing for quite a while, but should be very adamant about. And I think it's really important that they also point to the root of the issue with these lines of questioning. As he did, he said, look, it's a hypothetical. Why are you asking me about a hypothetical? But I would go even further and say, like, listen, you're asking me to form policy that's not I'm not in the position to form in a meeting that's not about that, based on things that, we all see and think of as reprehensible. What are you doing here? You're just trying to catch me in a gotcha. Like, come on, let's move on. Call them out for it, because they know what they're doing and everyone else knows what they're doing. So yeah, we just need to keep calling them out on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, all Americans want is a competent leader installed to be Secretary of Defense. And we want the road to that position, to that confirmation, to be one that's characterized by truth. We don't want falsehoods lobbed against candidates, trying to torpedo them because they're, of a different political mindset than we are. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this is the nation's security we're talking about here. We just want the truth and not politics. And it just seems like, I don't know, Democrats just seem incapable of grasping that point. And frankly, thank God for that, because the longer they continue in with this pattern of behavior, the more they're going to expose themselves, the more eyes are going to be opened, and the greater, I think, the likelihood of Trump's agenda ultimately meeting with success. So we've looked at Hegseth today. This week is busy. It's very full with other hearings that are getting underway in Washington. Senator Marco Rubio, Florida, of course, Trump's picked to be Secretary of State. Pam Bondi, his pick to be Attorney General. Those are two hearings that should be closely watched. I'm sure there will be a lot of very, very interesting information to come out of those. And then, of course, a little bit further down the road, we've got RFK Jr., which should be full of fireworks. I think that's going to be very, very interesting. Another post that is very much needed to be filled. So, all right, go ahead.
Oh, I just had one last thing I wanted to say. Again, this is a case where we said this about Trump several times and about some of his picks several times. This is a case where even if just one of these things that they promise to do gets done, the country is leaps and bounds ahead of where it is. And in this case, one of the biggest ones is the DEI part. if they can root DEI out of the government entirely, but definitely out of the Department of Defense, that alone is going to be huge. I just wanted to bring up here, there's some recent revelations on Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, her former deputy chief of staff, who was formerly a chief diversity officer, Linda Sun, for the state of New York. She turned out to be a Chinese spy. And if you can't put those two things together, like I said earlier, this is a generation of warfare that is completely different from before. There are elements of what we've experienced in the past. If you're a military historian, you'll know what I'm talking about. But there are new elements as well. And one of those things is these sort of, what's the right word for this? Kind of unconventional. It's an unconventional method, but you got to understand mass immigration. Let's take the LA fires that you discussed earlier. There are people lighting fires there. Who they're connected to, why they're doing it is uncertain right now. But is it a stretch to believe that some of the people that have been shipped into the country over the last 4 years might be here as saboteurs? It's a very common, warfare tactic. And if you're going to do that, why not also at the policy level? Why not get people into American universities, which, by the way, there are tens of thousands of foreign students who come into American universities, most of whom I'm sure are wonderful people. But the point being, how many can you sneak in as a foreign government? How many can you then have going from an American university into an American Fortune 500 or an American into the State Department or into the governor of New York's office? And, and then the idea of DEI just helps to give cover for moving your people into positions where you want them. Hey, we can't put an American in here. That's just not nice. We're going to put a XYZ that just so happens to be exactly who I need to have in place here. I mean, it just makes the spy game so easy. So these are the kinds of things that we don't always think about when we think about these problems. But I mean, there's war being waged at multiple levels here. And so you need competent people in there who are aware and who are ready to start to push back and make the changes that need to be made.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. And I think it's essential for viewers to understand that, this vast array of reforms is so desperately needed because of where we are in time, the geopolitical situation of the world, what it is. But this is only the beginning. Basically, if instituted successfully, this would just basically get us back on our footing, allowing us to really try to get ahead of our enemies, both foreign and domestic, frankly. So if Hegseth is confirmed, that's not going to, we're not going to wake up in mid-February and have to stop worrying about the China threat, the war in the Middle East and so forth. That's his assuming that role is really just going to be the very beginning of a long and difficult process of righting the ship, so to speak, and preparing us to really meet head on the ever-growing mountain of challenges that are coming at us here in the 21st century. Arthur, final thoughts?
You know what? I'm going to wrap it up with what we said earlier. This is a big deal. These are significant issues that need to be tackled. And I really am hoping and praying that each of these people that is getting confirmed and that is going to be going in is both up to the challenge and will do to the best of their ability what needs to be done to put us on the right track.
Amen. I second that. Very good. All right, Arthur, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Excellent analysis there. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us here on In Depth today. If you like what we do, please click on the provided donate link to help us keep working away. Until next time, I'm Stephen Wynn, coming to you from Kansas City. God bless you.